Magic Earth, Chapter 10, the end of the first season. The mist had not moved. It stood exactly where it had been the day before, an enormous white wall at the edge of the stone bridge, swallowing the horizon. It didn't breathe, didn't pulse, didn't twist. It simply waited, as if time itself had chosen that boundary and refused to pass. Jack stood on the highest battlement of Nopsum's castle, staring at it with the same strange pressure growing inside his chest. A pressure that felt like memory and instinct all at once. Something in him whispered that he needed to go there, to step down from the wall, cross the courtyard, and stand before Noyle. He didn't know what he would say. He only knew that he had to. He took one step toward the stairs, and immediately 2 guards grabbed his arms. "By order of the Mage-Kings," one said, voice trembling despite the attempt at authority, "you are not allowed to approach the bridge." Jack tried to pull free. "He's calling me." "You don't understand." "We understand perfectly," snapped a voice behind him. Iroh, Muhtar, and Nopsum climbed the stairs in full ceremonial cloaks, as if they were preparing for a parade instead of a confrontation with the greatest threat Magic Earth had ever seen. Their faces were tight with fear, but their clothes tried desperately to announce power. Muhtar adjusted his mantle. "If there is negotiation to be done, we will handle it." Nopsum lifted his chin. "The people need to see leadership." Iroh, normally the most honest of the 3, faltered for a moment as he looked at Jack. "Stay here. We will speak with him. Perhaps there is still a path that does not lead to war." Jack stared at them, stunned. They were terrified. It was obvious. And yet they wrapped themselves in pomp, walking as if dignity could hide trembling bones. "Let me go with you," Jack insisted. "He's not interested in your negotiation." "Enough," Iroh said sharply. But his voice broke slightly at the end. "You stay." The guards held him tighter. The 3 Mage-Kings descended the stairs, their cloaks dragging in the wind. Soldiers watched from wooden platforms, some with hope, others with dread. And far below, common people, blacksmiths, mothers, children half hiding behind their families, pressed themselves against the inner walls, trying to see this impossible meeting. Jack leaned over the battlement, heart in his throat. The kings crossed the courtyard, walked onto the stone bridge, and stopped several steps before the mist. And Noyle stepped forward. He emerged as if the mist simply released him, not with force but with quiet intention. His face still resembled Spes, the beard, the eyes, the human shape, but something was profoundly empty behind it. Not deadness, but a hollow truth. Iroh raised his hand first, as if greeting an old acquaintance. "Noyle," he said. "We have come to speak." "We seek—" Noyle didn't let him finish. His eyes slid over the 3 kings as if he were studying old dry parchment. Then he smiled, slowly, surgically. A smile with no warmth, no humor, only contempt. "You," he said, voice carrying effortlessly across the bridge, "are the cause of my existence." The words hung in the cold air. "You are the cause of my rancor, my anger, the reason Magic Earth rotted." Muhtar straightened defensively. "We have protected this land for generations." "You have protected nothing," Noyle interrupted, his voice calm but sharp as broken glass. "You ruled a kingdom not of magic, but of illusion. You fed your people promises you never intended to keep. You told them they were safe when they were not. You said the world would get better when you watched it decay." A murmur spread through the crowds behind the walls. Noyle took one step closer. Not enough to cross the bridge, but enough to tilt the world's attention toward him. "You hid power you did not understand," he said. "You held relics you did not know how to use. You pretended strength because you feared the truth. Magic Earth was dying long before I came." Nopsum raised his voice, desperate. "We did not know how to use the plants because only Elyon had that ability. Noyle's smile vanished. "That," he said softly, "is the greatest lie you ever told." Iroh blinked. "What lie?" Noyle leaned slightly forward. "Elyon." Silence spread like frost. "For problems you do not want to solve," Noyle continued, "you invent a savior, a myth, a distant miracle who will fix everything. Elyon never came because Elyon was never meant to come." The crowd shifted. Some gasped. Others whispered violently. "I, on the other hand," Noyle said, placing a hand on his own chest, "was created from the consequences you refused to face, the rot of your choices, the weight of your illusions, your opposite, your truth." Muhtar snapped, voice cracking. "You speak madness." Nopsam added, "You are a monster born of your own cruelty." Iroh stepped forward. "Enough of your poison." "Enough!" Noyle's eyes flashed. A wave of invisible force exploded outward. The three kings were thrown across the bridge like broken dolls, crashing into stone with a sound that tore gasps from the people watching. Noyle's voice roared across the valley. "Enough of hypocrisy." People recoiled. Some flinched, but many froze. And many more whispered, "He's right. Everything he said is true." Jack felt his stomach twist. The world had just shifted, and everyone knew it. The echo of Noyle's shout still vibrated in the stone when the silence finally settled. The three kings groaned as guards rushed to help them. Iroh clutched his ribs, Muhtar pressed a hand to his shoulder, and Nopsam blinked as if the world had tilted sideways. Their cloaks, so carefully arranged before, were now stained with dust and scraped at the edges. Noyle watched them with a calm that was almost worse than fury. "You feel it now, don't you?" he said. "A small taste of what you did to your own people. Years of pressure, expectations, lies, compressed into one blow." Muhtar spat blood onto the bridge. "You dare. I dare," Noyle cut, "because you spent decades pretending you were what you were not." He turned his gaze slightly upward, toward the walls, toward the sea of faces watching him. It was as if he were speaking to the kings and to the world at once. "You promised them a kingdom of magic," he continued, gesturing toward the city behind the walls. "What you gave them was a kingdom of illusions, patched over rotting foundations. Every harvest smaller than the last, every child born with weaker gifts, every winter colder." A woman on the wall covered her mouth with a shaking hand. A man nearby lowered his eyes, as if remembering every year he'd been told to trust the kings. "You told them," Noyle said, "that their suffering had meaning, that it would all be worth it when Elyon returned. You pointed to the sky, to old books, to half-burned prophecies and said, 'Wait, endure. One day the great Magus will make sense of it all.'" His voice dropped. "Elyon was your favorite lie." On the bridge, Iroh tried to stand straighter. "We did what we could with the magic we had. We kept the peace." "You kept your thrones," Noyle replied, without looking at him. "And you never once asked if there was another way to build this world." Jack felt the words sink into him like stones into water. He thought of nights at the tavern, listening to his father curse the taxes under his breath. Of Melanie's tired smile when the bread was thinner than last year. Of Liz playing with little illusions that faded in 15 seconds, laughing as if that time were enough. He had never blamed the kings before. He had never really looked at them. Noyle had. "And the plants," Noyle said, tone sharpening. "Raíz do esquecido, folia variável, flor etérea, pieces of a power older than your thrones. You locked them away like trophies you didn't know how to use." Nopsam shouted hoarsely. "We didn't use them because only Elyon, because it was convenient not to," Noyle snapped. "As long as Elyon was the only one who could handle this power, you never had to try. Never had to risk being wrong." You hid your incompetence behind the silhouette of a savior that never arrives. He spread his arms, as if presenting himself. I, on the other hand, did not wait for Elyon. I did not hide from what this world had become. His eyes darkened. I took every abandoned intention, every exiled talent, every thought you pushed into the dark, and I gave it a name. He paused. Noyle. The word hung heavy, like something carved instead of spoken. Somewhere along the wall, a man whispered, barely audible. So he chose to be what they denied. Jack's skin prickled. The kings began to talk over each other, accusing, defending, throwing words like stones. Madman, abomination, twisted reflection. Noyle let them speak until their voices blurred into each other, a single desperate noise. Then he lifted a hand. Quiet, he said. His voice alone was enough. The kings fell silent. The crowd did too. Even the wind seemed to thin out. Noyle's face smoothed into something eerily neutral. I did not come just to accuse you, he said. Accusations change nothing on their own. I came to offer a choice. The word choice rippled through the crowd like a shiver. He straightened, his posture almost formal. Here is my proposal for Magic Earth, he declared, his gaze sweeping from the kings to the people and back. The 3 Mage-Kings will be exiled, far from these walls, far from this land they have stalled for so long. Mutar's breath hitched. Nopsum's face went pale. Iroh's hands clenched. Your armies, Noyle continued, will be confined. No more marching men into storms they do not understand. No more sending soldiers to disappear into mist in your name. A soldier on the wall swallowed hard. Another lowered his spear slightly, as if suddenly unsure who he was pointing it at. And the rest, Noyle said, voice steady, will submit to me. The words were simple. The meaning was enormous. No more kings, no more illusion of shared power. One will, one law, one direction. In return, Noyle added, no more deaths. That last sentence fell like a stone into the silence. No more deaths. No more bodies in the snow. No more screams echoing off stone. No more families waiting at doors that never opened again. He let the promise hover, bright and poisonous. When I say the rest, he went on, his eyes finding Jack on the battlement, I mean everyone in Magic Earth. He held Jack's gaze a second longer. Especially Jack. Jack felt his heart jolt. Somewhere below, someone gasped. Another person muttered a curse. A child clutched her mother's sleeve. You have carried their lies, Noyle said, his eyes never leaving Jack. You have stood under their banners. You have seen what they really are. You know this world needs something different. Jack looked away first, not because he was afraid, but because he knew. Every eye on that wall, every heart in that courtyard, was now waiting to see what he would do. Noyle took a half step back. That is my offer, he concluded. The kings in exile, the armies confined, the rest under my rule. No more illusions. And if you accept, his voice softened, no more war. Silence answered him. Silence from the kings, who were too stunned to reply. Silence from the soldiers, whose hands shook on their weapons. Silence from the people, who could hear truth and danger in the same sentence. Then Noyle finished. You have 1 day. He turned without ceremony and walked back into the mist. The white swallowed him whole, leaving only the echo of his words behind. On the wall, someone finally whispered, what if he's right? What if he's worse? Jack stood frozen, feeling the world split into 2 paths that were both wrong. The moment Noyle disappeared into the mist, the entire courtyard erupted. Not in screams, not in panic, but in the confused, buzzing shock of a world trying to think for itself again. Voices rose everywhere. He's lying. He has to be. But was he wrong? If the kings leave, what happens to us? No more war, he promised. Children clung to parents. Old merchants shook their heads. Soldiers shifted uneasily, glancing between the bridge and the castle, unsure which direction meant loyalty anymore. Jack remained at the battlement, hands gripping the cold stone. He felt the tremors around him, not of fear, but of doubt spreading like cracks through a sheet of ice. This wasn't the same fear Noyle's monsters brought. This was deeper, more dangerous. It was the fear of choosing wrong. Behind him, the battlement door slammed open. Iroh, Muhtar, and Nopsam marched through, supported by guards, cloaks torn, faces red with humiliation. "Back inside," Muhtar ordered sharply, waving off the guards. "Now." The people parted as the kings limped past them, but not with reverence, only because they needed space to observe. Conversations followed the kings like whispers of wind. They look shaken. Magic-Kings? They look like old men. They didn't deny anything he said. Jack heard it all. So did the kings. Inside the castle, the doors slammed shut. Guards stood stiff as statues outside the council chamber. Only the 3 kings and a handful of their most loyal counselors were allowed inside. Jack stayed in the corridor, listening. The argument started immediately. Muhtar's voice rose first, brittle with fear. "We cannot accept his terms. Exile. Confinement. He wants us erased." Nopsam snapped back. "He wants to replace us with himself. This is not an offer. It's a takeover." Iroh, quieter but firmer, said, "And yet, there is truth in what he spoke." The room froze. Even the counselors seemed to stop breathing. Muhtar hissed, "Do not repeat his poison." Iroh paced, "I am not saying we bow to him. I am saying the people heard him. If we do not respond strategically, we lose before any battle begins." There was a pause, a long one. Then Nopsam whispered the word none of them wanted to say. Revolt. Silence again. The idea was not impossible, not anymore. Finally, Iroh exhaled. "We do what we must. We refuse his offer, but we shape the people's mind first." Muhtar nodded slowly. A speech, carefully crafted. Nopsam added, "We will call him a deceiver, a manipulator, a false prophet." "And," said Iroh, "we remind the people that we have dragons now. They are symbols of hope, power, protection." Jack's breath hitched outside the door. Not once did they discuss Noyle's accusations. Not once did they consider truth. Not once did they mention the death toll. Only control. A counselor spoke nervously. "What if Jack disagrees publicly? The people will listen to him." Muhtar slammed the table. "Then Jack stays silent. We will use the dragons to drown out uncertainty." Jack closed his eyes. The kings, hurt, wounded, exposed, were about to do exactly what Noyle accused them of doing. Hide behind spectacle. Hide behind animals they barely understood. Hide behind a promise of victory they could not guarantee. Moments later, the heavy doors opened. The king swept past Jack without acknowledging him. "Gather the people," Iroh commanded the guards. "All of them. No one stays home." Within an hour, the courtyard was full. Families, soldiers, merchants, children, all waiting. The king stepped onto the upper balcony overlooking the crowd, wearing fresh robes that tried to erase the memory of their humiliation moments before. Iroh spoke first, voice amplified by magic light torches. "People of magic earth, do not be deceived." Nopsam followed. Noyle began with lies, twisted truths, and illusions, and he will continue that way. Muhtar closed the triad. "He tempts you with promises of peace while hiding his intent. Domination." Then Iroh delivered the final blow. "And we assure you, With the 3 dragons on our side, victory is not only possible, it is certain. The crowd stirred. Some clapped. Some nodded. Some cheered weakly. Most simply wanted something to believe in. Jack watched from the edge, swallowed by unease. Each cheer felt like another piece of truth buried. Another stone placed over a grave of doubts no one dared to dig. Beside him, a woman whispered to her husband, "If the kings say we can win, then we must trust them." Another man muttered, "We can't abandon the throne. We've always followed the kings." Familiar patterns, familiar trust, familiar illusions. Jack felt sick. Yes, Noyle was dangerous. Yes, Noyle killed. Yes, Noyle manipulated. But the kings were manipulating too. And the people, exhausted, afraid, desperate for certainty, were ready to believe whichever voice sounded louder. When the speech ended, cheers rose across the courtyard. But not from Jack. Inside him, something twisted tightly, warning him, something is wrong, terribly wrong, and tomorrow they would all face the consequence. Dawn arrived colorless. There was no sunrise, no orange or gold spilling over the horizon. Only a pale, cold light, the kind that feels borrowed, like the world wasn't fully awake or wasn't sure if it deserved to be. Jack barely slept, pacing the battlements for most of the night. Every time he looked toward the edge of the bridge, he saw the same thing. The mist, still and patient, as if it were listening to them, listening to him. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened next would shape not just the day, but the fate of Magic Earth entirely. Shortly after the bells rang 6 times, the kings ordered the soldiers into formation. Hundreds of men lined the walls, shields polished, spears glistening with frost. The archers stood like statues in the towers. Even the stable hands and cooks stood ready with buckets of water, cloths, anything that might be used in battle. The people gathered again along the inner walls, not cheering this time, waiting. Aero, Mutar, and Nopsum stood before the crowd, armor over their robes, each wearing a symbol of their kingdom. Aero, the blue wind crest, Mutar, the swirling green sigil, Nopsum, the pale spiral of thought. They tried to look brave. They looked terrified. Jack stood behind them on the battlement walkway. No guard stopped him this time. Everyone knew his voice had already reached the people. Silencing him now would raise suspicion. Iroh lifted his arm. A horn sounded. The gates opened. The kings stepped forward onto the bridge, not as negotiators this time, but as rulers delivering an answer. Across the gap of stone, the mist parted, and Noyle stepped out again, exactly as he had before, as if he had not moved all night, as if he had been waiting for them. His expression didn't change. He simply observed them, then lowered his gaze slightly, as if disappointed by an answer he already knew. "I already know your decision," he said, voice calm. "But I will give you one last chance to change it." Iroh inhaled sharply, but before he could respond, a voice rose from the crowd. Not from the kings, not from the soldiers, not from the walls, from the people. An old man stepped forward, thin, hunched, wrapped in a brown cloak. He looked small compared to the kings, almost fragile. But his voice carried like a bell. "We heard your words yesterday," the old man said to Noyle. "Many of us. We saw reason in them. We saw truth. We saw what our kings hid from us for years." A wave rippled through the crowd. People shifted, some nodded. The man continued, "We want peace. We want no more deaths. If your offer means that, what should we do?" A silence fell. A heavy one. Noyle's answer was simple. "Either all accept," he said, "or all suffer the same fate." The old man bowed his head. The crowd absorbed his words like cold air into lungs. Sharp, painful, unavoidable. Mutter stepped forward. "This is proof. He threatens you. He will not spare anyone." But the people didn't cheer. Not this time. They were thinking, struggling, afraid of both paths. And then Jack's voice broke through the tension. "I need to speak." It echoed across the courtyard, off the stone walls, over the heads of soldiers. A moment of breathless anticipation spread. The kings turned sharply toward Jack, but none moved to stop him. They couldn't. Not now. Not after everything. Jack walked down the battlement steps one by one, past the soldiers, past the whispering crowd, past the kings, until he stood on the bridge. The wind felt colder here, sharper, as if he had stepped into the thin space between two worlds. Noyle watched him approach with an expression that was almost expectant, as if this moment had always belonged to them. Iroh hissed under his breath, "Jack, don't..." But Jack didn't stop. He walked until he stood on the last slab of stone before the mist's edge, close enough to see Noyle clearly, far enough not to be swallowed. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Noyle inclined his head, almost gently. "Jack," he said, "you are special, and every act you've taken has been justified, even if those around you do not understand it yet." Jack clenched his fists. "You exposed them," Noyle continued. "You showed what they truly are. You saw through their illusions long before they admitted them. You know this world is broken, stagnant, rotting under their rule." Jack inhaled slowly. He couldn't deny some of it. That was the worst part. Noyle's voice was steady, persuasive, almost soft. "I tried to show you a different world, Jack. On the road, in the snow, in the ruins, through every conversation we had. You learned from me because you saw truth, not comfort, not tradition. Truth." Jack let the silence stretch. Then finally he answered. "Spess," he said, using the name that once meant something. "Most of what you said yesterday is true. Much of what you're saying now is also true." A collective breath was sucked in behind him. "But," Jack continued, voice firming, "I cannot agree with your actions. People died so you could make a point. Families were torn apart. You say you want peace, but you brought death to get it." A flicker, barely visible, crossed Noyle's expression. Something like disappointment. Or annoyance. "You still lack experience," Noyle said calmly. "You are young. Intelligent, yes. Special, yes. But there are things you cannot yet understand. I tried to guide you." Jack nodded slowly. "And I learned things, important things, painful things." He stepped closer to the border of the mist. "But guidance doesn't excuse cruelty." Noyle's eyes narrowed, and the world held its breath. A thin wind blew across the bridge, brushing Jack's cloak against his legs. It wasn't cold, not truly. It felt more like the world breathing very carefully, as if it didn't want to interrupt what was happening. Noyle stood only a few paces away, framed by the boundary of the mist, like a figure painted into another reality. Jack felt the pressure inside his chest again, the same feeling he'd had since Eldoria fell silent, since the tavern stood empty, since the dragons had bowed to him. A feeling that he was standing somewhere he was always meant to stand. Noyle's expression softened, but only slightly. "You learned from me," Noyle repeated quietly. "You saw what I saw, felt what I felt. You know the world cannot continue as it is." Jack nodded. "I know that, and I know the kings failed. I know they hid truth they shouldn't have. I know they let the world crumble while pretending everything was under control." A murmur rose behind him. The people reacting, the Kings stiffening. But what you did, Jack continued, eyes locked on Noyle, is not the answer. Noyle tilted his head. What else could I have done? Words were useless. Warnings were ignored. The Kings needed to be confronted. The people needed to see the truth. You confronted them with death, Jack said, voice raw. You proved your point by destroying everything around it. That destruction, Noyle said calmly, was the natural consequence of the world they built. Jack stepped forward again, dangerously close to the mist. Soldiers behind him gasped. The Kings tensed, but Jack didn't enter. Not yet. You said, Jack continued, that the Kings were hypocrites, that they used illusions and excuses to avoid responsibility. They did, Noyle said. And you? Jack asked. You began with a lie. You came to Eldoria pretending to help, pretending to offer guidance, pretending to be Spez. A flicker, a real one this time, crossed Noyle's face. Anger, pride wounded. Hard to say. Jack didn't let him interrupt. You told me all or nothing. You told the people all or nothing. But now, you want to make an exception for me. You want me to stand beside you while everyone else suffers if they refuse. Noyle's jaw tightened. Because you are different. I'm not different, Jack said, shaking his head. I'm part of Magic Earth. I'm part of the people. If they fall, I fall. If they suffer, I suffer. He pointed to the city behind him. I belong with them. For the first time, Noyle's voice sharpened. They do not deserve you, Jack. Jack didn't flinch. Then teach them. Don't destroy them. Noyle closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if holding back something. A memory, perhaps. A ghost of Spez that tried to surface and failed. You think mercy is the answer? Noyle said. You think you can change the Kings, change the people, change a world that has been decaying for centuries. Maybe I can't, Jack admitted, but killing them won't fix anything either. Noyle opened his eyes again, colder now. This world is corrupted, wrong, stagnant. I can rebuild it in a single generation. And what world will it be? Jack asked quietly, if it's built on fear. A long silence followed. Even the mist behind Noyle seemed to hesitate. Then Noyle exhaled slowly. I asked you something before, he said, and I'll ask again. His gaze pierced straight through Jack. Why defend them? Why stand on their side? Why not expose every lie the Magos race ever told? Why not abandon their crumbling throne? Jack didn't hesitate, because I don't know if your lie has ended. The words struck harder than any weapon. Noyle's eyes widened, a small, violent widening, like a crack spreading across glass. Jack continued, voice steady. You said Elyon was a lie. But so were you. You pretended to be a mentor, a protector. You pretended to care. So tell me, Noyle, how many lies have you already burned through? And how many are left? Noyle took a single step forward. The mist followed behind him like a living pulse. Jack, he said, voice lower now. You are young. You see glimpses of truth, but not the whole. You have potential for wisdom, but not yet the experience to guide a world. Jack swallowed. Then let me ask something simple, something anyone could understand. He took a breath. Why do you want this war? You already have creatures, a kingdom, people maybe, regions we haven't even seen yet. Why destroy Magic Earth? Why not leave it as it is? Noyle studied him, as if considering which truth to offer. Finally he spoke. My land is suffering, dry, harsh, scarred. Yours has everything. Mountains, valleys, forests, rivers, life, light, history. Magic Earth could be magnificent. But it is being wasted, ruined, stained by incompetence. His voice didn't rise. It fell, as if weighed down by something heavy. "You call me cruel," Noyle said. "But cruelty is allowing a land this rich to die under the rule of men who cannot protect it." Jack stared at him. For a moment, they were just two people. Not enemies, not symbols, just two beings who saw the same world rotting for different reasons. But the moment broke when Jack whispered, "You won't win. Not against the dragons." Noyle lifted his head. A slow, deliberate smirk appeared. "I think," he said, "you overestimate them." Jack's pulse spiked. He stepped back, turning toward the castle. "We'll see," he said. His voice didn't shake, but his hands did, because deep inside, something told him. He was walking toward a battle neither side was ready for. Night fell with a silence so complete it felt unnatural. No dogs barked, no children cried, no carts rolled over cobblestone. It was as if the entire world inhaled and then forgot how to breathe. Torches flickered along the battlements, glowing in shaky halos. Soldiers stood in broken lines, exhausted, terrified, clutching weapons with white-knuckled fists. In the courtyard, the people huddled in blankets, whispering prayers to gods who hadn't answered in decades. Jack walked among them, feeling eyes follow him wherever he moved, eyes full of desperation, expectation, and fear. They looked at him the way drowning men look at driftwood, as if he were the thin piece of floating hope between life and the unseen depths. But Jack didn't feel like hope. Not tonight. Every conversation replayed in his mind. Spess's first lessons, Noyle's accusations, the king's lies, the truth buried under snow and silence. And above everything, a single question echoing like a heartbeat. Is this war necessary? Or are we marching into it because no one knows how to stop it? Jack climbed the tower stairs slowly. At the top, the world stretched open. All sky, all mist, all waiting. From this height, Noyle looked almost unreal, a lone figure in a sea of white, framed by the faintest glow from the torches behind Jack. Iroh stood nearby, arms crossed, gaze fixed outward. Mudar whispered to Nopsam a few paces back, their silhouettes tight with worry. No one spoke to Jack. No one dared. And then, a sound broke through the stillness. A low, rumbling growl. Distant, yet unmistakable. The dragons. They paced restlessly on the far side of the courtyard, claws scratching stone, wings twitching as if their bodies sensed a coming storm. Their eyes flicked toward the mist again and again, wide and glowing with unease. Iroh forced confidence into his voice. They can sense him. They know the enemy is near. Jack didn't answer. He wasn't sure that was the whole truth. He felt something else in their movement, not just alertness, but resistance. Like their instincts were fighting something unseen. And then it happened. A roar split the night, not from dragons, not from humans, from the mist. The first wave crashed against the light of the torches, the monsters of Noyle bounding out of the white like nightmares searching for breath. The Cerberus came first, 3 heads snapping and snarling, eyes glowing like coals. Behind it, the deformed bull-like creature charged with impossible force, snow bursting around its hooves. And higher above, circling, dropping, vanishing in swoops, the winged hyenas, their thin screeches slicing the night. "At positions!" Iroh shouted. "Shields up!" a commander cried. "Archers, hold, hold!" The battle began in chaos. Hyenas dove at the battlements, ripping at shields and knocking soldiers backward. Screams erupted as some were pulled over the edge. The Cerberus barreled into the lower gate, jaws clamping onto armor and tearing men off their feet. The bull creature smashed into a line of spearmen, throwing them aside like dolls. It wasn't a coordinated attack. It wasn't a tactical strike. It was testing. Again. Always testing. Jack tasted metal in his mouth. Fear, blood, both. He ran down the steps, sword drawn, though he knew it wouldn't matter against these creatures. He swung at one of the hyenas as it swooped low. The blade passed through a wing, and the creature shrieked before retreating. The soldiers rallied. And for hours, the battle dragged on. Not a war, but a slaughter on both sides. Arrow shouted orders until his voice cracked. Muhtar conjured brief illusions that lasted barely seconds. Nopsam yelled to archers who could barely see through the smoke. Jack fought until his arms burned, and still, no sign of Noyle. Only his creatures. Only the mist. Only the sense of being slowly, deliberately exhausted. Sometime near dawn, the creatures pulled back into the mist. They didn't run. They didn't flee. They simply retreated. As if satisfied. As if they had seen enough. Soldiers collapsed to their knees. Some cried. Some stared blankly at the snow. Some whispered silent prayers, not of hope, but of surrender. Iroh leaned against the wall, sweat on his brow. Muhtar's hands shook uncontrollably. Nopsam's eyes darted everywhere, as if searching for an escape. And then Muhtar said the words the kings were too afraid to say first. "Jack, call the dragons." Jack froze. Iroh swallowed. "It's time." Nopsam added, "Without them, we cannot win." Jack knew the truth behind their voices. They were losing control. Over their soldiers. Over the people. Over themselves. He looked at the dragons again. They weren't resting. They weren't afraid. They were resisting the pull of something. Something that kept them from crossing the bridge. He climbed the steps back to the wall, hands trembling, voice shaking. He stood at the edge, looking down at the mist. "Noyle," Jack shouted. "This is your last chance! End this!" A faint laugh came through the white. A slow, mocking, surgical laugh. Jack's heart iced over. He raised his hand toward the courtyard. "Dragons!" he commanded. "To the bridge!" They roared, an earth-shaking sound. They launched into the air. Wings beat the night open like thunder. They soared toward Noyle. And stopped, right at the edge of the mist. Their wings thrashed. Their bodies twisted. They hissed and roared in agitation. But they would not cross. Jack's throat tightened. "Attack!" he yelled. The dragons refused. Something held them back. Something deeper than fear. Noyle stepped forward through the mist's edge. "I warned you," he said, voice echoing unnaturally in the stillness. "You have no chance." And for the first time that night, the people believed him. Panic spread through the courtyard like wildfire the moment the dragons pulled back. Some screamed. Some fell to their knees. Some pressed their children against their chests as if their bodies alone could shield them from the end of the world. The kings shouted commands, trying desperately to regain control, but their voices were drowned out by fear. "They won't go. The dragons refuse. We're finished." He was right. Noyle was right. What do we do now? Jack stood frozen on the battlement, eyes locked on the dragons still hovering at the mist's edge, wings beating the air frantically but refusing to cross. They looked like colossal birds trapped against an invisible barrier. Arrow grabbed Jack's arm. "Make them go. They must obey you." "They're not bound to me," Jack snapped, wrenching free. "They follow me because they choose to." Muhtar's face twisted. "Then make them choose differently." "They can't," Jack whispered. "Something is stopping them." Nopsam's voice trembled. "The mist?" Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew. The mist wasn't just a place. It was a rule, a boundary, a limit, a world where dragons could not exist. The realization broke something in the people. The last thread of faith snapped. Soldiers slumped to the ground. Mothers wept. fathers buried faces in their hands. It was the first time Magic Earth truly understood that this war was not a war of men and beasts. It was a war of worlds, and they were losing. Noyle stepped forward again, the mist pulling back just enough to reveal him fully. His presence was unnerving, calm, unhurried, untouched by the chaos his creatures had caused. He stood there like a judge waiting for a sentence he himself had written. "Magic Earth," Noyle said, voice smooth and steady. "Your protectors refuse to cross. Your kings hide behind lies. Your armies fall apart. I offer one final chance for peace." A hush fell. "Submit," he said, "and no more lives will be lost." His eyes settled on Jack. "Especially yours." Jack felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Arrow stepped forward. "We do not accept," Mutter shouted. "Your monsters killed dozens." Nopsum screamed, "You want dominion, nothing more." But their voices sounded weak now, thin, like arrows shot against a mountain. And the people no longer believed in those voices. Faces turned toward Jack, hope flickering, fear trembling, waiting for him, always him, to give an answer. Jack felt the world shrinking around him, compressing into a single narrow path. A path only he could walk. He looked at the dragons, their roars frustrated, their claws scraping stone, their wings beating with frantic urgency. They could not help. He looked at the kings, pale, shaking, pretending they were still in control. They could not help. He looked at the people, terrified, exhausted, clinging to the idea that maybe the boy who had stopped the swords once could do something again. He could not help them by standing still. Something inside him pulsed. Not magic, never magic, but something older, something in his bones, something that had woken the day the swords fell in the Hall of Winds. Jack stepped forward, down the battlement stairs, through the courtyard, past soldiers who stared at him like a lantern in the dark. He walked toward the bridge. Iroh shouted, "Jack!" "Stop!" Mutar yelled. "You can't go into the mist!" Nopsum screamed, "This is madness!" Jack didn't turn. He stepped onto the first stone of the bridge, then the second, then the third. The crowd gasped. Noyle watched him approach with a flicker of interest. The first genuine emotion visible on his face since the entire attack began. "You walk toward death," Noyle said. Jack didn't stop. "You walk into my realm," Noyle warned. Jack kept moving. "You walk where dragons cannot follow." Jack stepped closer. 7 steps. 6, 5, 4. When he was only a few paces away from the mist, he finally stopped. Then he opened his arms. Not wide, not dramatic, just enough to welcome whatever came. The mist surged forward, a shimmering wave, a living breath, a force that had swallowed cities, and stopped, right at Jack's toes. The entire world froze. The soldiers, the kings, the people, even Noyle. Jack took another step, into the mist. A collective scream rose from behind him, but the mist recoiled, like a tide hitting a barrier, like a predator confronted with something it didn't understand. Creatures inside snarled and clawed, pushing forward, trying to leap at him, and failed. Jack walked deeper. Every step drove the mist backward, bending around him like an unseen dome, refusing to touch him. Noyle stared, eyes wide. Not with anger, not with fury, but with something rarer. Fear. Jack kept walking until he stood only a few meters away from him. Noyle aimed a hand and released a blast of dark magic, the kind that bent metal, crushed stone, silenced minds. It touched Jack's skin and dissolved into nothing, like smoke blown into a void. Noyle fired again, and again, and again. Nothing. The air around Jack shimmered faintly each time, not with power, but with the absence of it. The void inside him expanded with every step, swallowing every attempt. Noyle staggered backward, pale. Not from the effort, from the realization. Jack reached him. And for the first time, Noyle, the being who commanded the mist, who shaped creatures from nightmares, looked small, fragile, human. Jack's hand tightened. He could strike, he could push, he could end everything. He almost did. Until, "Jack, don't!" Jack froze. The mist parted. 2 figures emerged from the white. His parents, alive, eyes soft, voices trembling, arms open. The sight shattered him. "Where's Liz?" Jack gasped. "She's safe," Melanie said. "She's not here," Theodore added. "But she's safe." They stepped forward. But something in their eyes was wrong. Jack felt it before he understood it. Something hollow. Something that wasn't family. Something that wasn't real. He stepped back. "You're not them," Jack whispered. Noyle exhaled slowly. "Jack, they are free. They can choose where to stand." Jack looked at them. They did not breathe mist, but they stood in it. Unaffected, unchanged, obedient. Something inside Jack cracked. "You said everyone must submit," Jack said. "But not me." "Not you," Noyle agreed. "I am part of Magic Earth," Jack replied. "I choose with them, not above them." Melanie's empty smile faltered. Theodore blinked slowly, too slowly. Jack raised his chin. "Release them." Noyle's eyes hardened. "They are free." "They're not," Jack said. "They're yours." Silence. Pure, heavy, final. Noyle's jaw tightened. "If you want to see Lice again, return to your castle." Jack stared at him, at his parents, at the mist, then said, voice cold as winter, "If I return, it will not be on my knees." Noyle's expression did not change, but the mist behind him darkened. Jack turned. He walked slowly back toward the castle. The mist did not follow. His parents stayed with Noyle. The crowd waited breathlessly. When Jack stepped through the gates, everything erupted. Cheers. Celebration. Hands reaching for him, voices praising him, kings calling him hero. He raised a hand. Silence fell instantly. "I did not defeat Noyle," Jack said. His voice shook, not with fear, but with truth. "I only made him step back. He will return, stronger." The joy drained from the faces around him. And Jack felt nothing but the weight of the world settling onto his shoulders. The first battle had ended, but the war had only begun. The celebration ended as quickly as it began. It wasn't because the people didn't want to cheer. It wasn't because the kings didn't try to parade Jack before the crowd like a trophy. It was because the silence in Jack's eyes was louder than any victory song. He stood in the courtyard, snow slowly falling around him, flakes landing on his hair and cloak without melting. Soldiers whispered to one another. Children tugged on their mothers' sleeves. The wounded groaned softly as healers carried them inside. But Jack didn't move. He stared at the bridge, the place where his parents had stood beside Noyle, their faces gentle and wrong, their eyes familiar and hollow. Iroh approached him first. "You saved us." His voice was too smooth, too rehearsed, an echo of the king he wanted to still be. Jack didn't answer. Muhtar stepped forward next. "We must use this moment. The people trust you. The kingdoms will listen. With you at the front line, we can unify." "No," Jack said. Just one word. Quiet. Sharp enough to stop both kings mid-breath. Nopsam swallowed, his voice thin. "Jack, this was a victory, a real one. You pushed back the mist. You faced Noyle alone." Jack's jaw tightened. "I didn't win." No one argued. Not even the kings. Because behind his words, the truth pulsed. He had faced Noyle. He had touched the mist. He had survived. But he had not saved his parents. He had not reached Lys. He had not broken the power Noyle held. The people gathered in smaller groups now, talking in hushed tones, watching Jack from a careful distance, not wanting to intrude, not wanting to look away. Jack turned from the kings and walked toward the stables where the dragons rested. They sensed him immediately, lifting their heads, eyes glowing with something he wasn't sure was trust, fear, or sadness. He reached out a trembling hand, placing it gently against the muzzle of the central dragon. Warm breath puffed onto his palm. "You couldn't follow me," Jack whispered. The dragon lowered its head, ashamed, as if it had failed him. "But you wanted to," he said softly. "That's enough." A distant horn sounded in the mountains, a symbol of mourning. The soldiers who had died in the night were being carried to the pyres. Jack turned away. He needed air. He needed quiet. He needed to think. He walked through the inner gate, up the steps, toward the outer wall. Snow crunched under his boots. The night wind brushed against his face. Below him, the torches cast long, trembling shadows on the stone path. He closed his eyes. He tried to remember the feeling of home, the warmth of the tavern hearth. Lys laughing as she spilled flour everywhere. Melanie's hands brushing hair from his forehead. Theodore telling stories about how magic used to be. But every memory felt fragile now, like something that might crumble if he held it too tightly. Footsteps approached behind him. He didn't turn. Iroh spoke, voice gentler than before. "We know this is difficult." Jack said nothing. "We know what it means to lose. You don't know." Jack's voice was so calm it cut deeper than a shout. "You didn't see them." Mutter sighed. "Jack, whatever Noyle did, he likely copied their forms, illusions, manipulations. They were not real." "They were real enough to answer him," Jack replied. "And real enough not to answer me." Nopsum stepped closer. His voice trembled. "Jack, do you believe they are alive?" Jack looked at the mist again. The untouched, patient, motionless mist. "Yes." The kings exchanged glances, not hopeful ones, worried ones. Jack continued, "But not untouched, not themselves." Iroh straightened. "Then we prepare, we rebuild, we rally the kingdoms, we use this moment to gather strength." Jack turned to him, eyes colder than winter. "You're already trying to use this for power." Iroh flinched. Mutar stiffened. Nopsum looked away. Jack's voice did not rise, but it carried the weight of everything he had endured. "This isn't the time for speeches. It isn't the time for thrones. It isn't the time for pretending we understand the enemy." A heavy silence followed. Then Jack said the words the kings feared most. "Noyle didn't retreat because we won. He retreated because he learned. Next time he'll be stronger." The king swallowed hard. Jack turned back to the mist, eyes narrowing. "And so will I." The night felt wrong. Not dangerous. That would have been easier. Just wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Too aware. Jack walked along the outer wall while the 3 dragons slept in the courtyard below, curled like living mountains of scale and breath. Their warmth drifted upward in faint waves, mixing with the cold wind and carrying an unfamiliar sense of longing, as if even they, creatures ancient and proud, wished they could forget the face of the mist. Down in the city, people whispered in their homes, celebrating and fearing in the same breath. Windows glowed faintly, fires crackled. Children asked questions their parents didn't know how to answer. Some said Jack had defeated Noyle. Some said he had made a pact with him. Some said he was the next Elyon. Some said he was the end of the world. Jack let none of the voices enter him. He kept walking. Every step felt heavier than the last, not because of exhaustion, but because the future itself seemed to press on him. The footsteps behind him were softer this time. Nopsam. The king approached with the caution of someone waking a sleeping wolf. "Jack," he murmured, "may I speak with you?" Jack didn't turn. Most people do tonight. Nopsam stood beside him, leaning his forearms on the stone edge of the wall. He looked more human than ever. Older, smaller, almost apologetic. "The truth is," Nopsam said, "we don't know what happens now." Jack stared at the frozen horizon. "I do." Nopsam's breath caught. "And what is that?" Jack answered with no hesitation. This wasn't a battle. It was a warning. The Mage-King swallowed hard. "Then we must prepare." Jack cut him off. "Prepare how? With what? You can barely read minds anymore. Mutar's illusions crumble in sunlight. Iroh's wind nearly blew him off a staircase today. Magic is failing, Nopsam. You know it." Nopsam exhaled slowly. "Yes," he admitted. "We do know." Jack's eyes narrowed. "And yet you told the people we would win because we have 3 dragons." Nopsam flinched as if slapped. That wasn't a lie. It was strategy. They needed hope. They needed truth, Jack replied sharply. Hope built on lies is just another kind of mist. Nopsam's voice cracked. "Jack, they were terrified. The moment Spes, Noyle, said you were essential, they clung to you more than the kings. They would have followed you right then. We needed to act fast. We needed to remind them we're still—" "Leaders?" Jack asked, turning toward him. "Or symbols you can't hold together anymore?" Nopsam fell silent. His breathing fogged the air. "You're angry," he whispered. "I'm awake," Jack corrected. Nopsam nodded once, defeated. "As you should be." A pause. Wind brushed past them like a sigh from the stone itself. Then Nopsam asked the question he had never dared ask aloud. "What do you think Noyle wants?" Jack's answer was immediate. "Change." Nopsam blinked. "What kind of change?" "The kind that burns everything first." Nopsam looked down at his hands, old hands, trembling hands, as though seeing the truth for the first time. "He doesn't want a throne," Jack said. "He doesn't want a kingdom. He wants Terra Magica to break so something else can replace it." Nopsam shivered. "And what about you, Jack? What do you want?" It was the one question Jack did not want to face. He forced himself to breathe. "I want my sister back." Nopsam closed his eyes, and for the first time he did not speak like a king. He spoke like a man who had lost too much. "Then we will search for her." Jack shook his head. "No. You'll rebuild your armies. You'll prepare speeches. You'll try to hold the world in place even while it cracks." Nopsam didn't deny it. Jack continued. "But I will find her, and my parents, and whatever truth Noyle is hiding." The Mage-King hesitated, then whispered, "And what if the truth destroys you?" Jack finally met his gaze. "Then I'll face it awake." Nopsam nodded, deeply, slowly, as if accepting something no king should ever accept. "You are not Elion," he murmured. Jack exhaled. "I'm not trying to be." "And yet," Nopsam said softly, "you are the only one who turned the mist back, the only one Noyle speaks to, the only one the dragons follow." Jack didn't respond. He couldn't, because none of that felt like power. It felt like a weight tied to his ribs, a weight he couldn't put down. Suddenly, a horn sounded below, not alarm, not danger, but the soft, deep tone signaling dawn's first patrol. The sky was beginning to pale. Nopsam stepped back from the wall. "Rest, Jack. Tomorrow we decide how to protect the kingdom." Jack didn't look away from the mist. "You can protect the kingdom," he said. "I'm going after the truth." Nopsam froze, then nodded once, full of fear. Because truth was always more dangerous than any army, and Jack Vance was choosing to chase it. Dawn broke cold and colorless. Not the pink-blue glow that usually softened Nopsum's walls, but a thin, pale light, like the world itself was hesitating to wake up. Jack hadn't slept. He stood in the courtyard long before the first guard changed shifts, arms crossed, breath trailing in the frozen air. The dragons slept nearby, their tails wrapped around their bodies, their wings tucked in tight. Even they seemed drained, as if the night had stolen something from them too. When the gates creaked open, the people emerged slowly. Some approached Jack. Some kept their distance. But all eyes carried the same mixture of gratitude and fear. They whispered, "He saved us. He drove Noyle back. He's the reason we're alive." And underneath it all, what will he do now? Jack didn't know the answer, not fully. But he knew one thing. He couldn't stay behind walls. Not while his family was somewhere inside that mist. By the time the 3 Mage-Kings approached, the sun had risen, though only barely. Mutar looked fragile, Iroh looked anxious, and Nopsum looked older than he had the day before. Iroh spoke first, voice strained. "Jack, we've discussed our next steps. Our armies will regroup and—" Jack interrupted, his tone calm but absolute. "Your armies aren't ready, and they won't be in time." Mutar bristled. "What do you propose then? We can't simply wait for him to return." Jack met his eyes. "I'm not waiting." Silence tightened around them. Nopsum stepped forward. "Jack, you can't go alone." "I can," Jack replied. "And I will." "Into the mist?" Iroh asked, horrified. Jack nodded. "My family is there, and I felt something last night. Whatever stops magic doesn't stop me." Mutar shook his head. "You faced Noyle once because he allowed it. He was studying you. If you go to him again, he won't hold back." Jack's voice softened, but his resolve did not. He didn't hold back. He couldn't touch me. The kings stared, shaken by the truth they wanted to ignore. Nopsum folded his hands. "Jack, you cannot imagine what he is capable of." Jack finally turned toward them fully. "And you cannot imagine what I'm willing to face." Then, the sound hit. A vibration, deep, distant, barely detectable, but unmistakable. The 3 dragons lifted their heads at the same time, eyes wide. The mist on the horizon shimmered, as if reacting to something only they could hear. Jack felt it too. A pull, quiet and insistent, like a heartbeat echoing through stone. Iroh whispered, "What is that?" Jack inhaled slowly. The next step. As he walked toward the gate, the crowd parted without a single word. Mothers clutched their children. Soldiers lowered their heads. Elders whispered prayers. The dragons rose behind him but did not follow, not past the threshold. They couldn't. Jack placed one hand on the icy wood of the gate, then turned back. "Listen to me," he said, his voice carrying through the courtyard. "You think we won? We didn't. We survived a test. Nothing more." The silence was absolute. "I will look for my family. I will look for the truth. But all of you, all of Terra Magica, must stop pretending the world is what it used to be." Even the kings did not breathe. "When I return," Jack continued, "I don't want another lie waiting for me. No more illusions. No more false victories. No more thrones held together by fear." He paused, letting the words settle. "If we face Noyle again, and we will, I want a world worth saving." The people bowed their heads, some in shame, some in hope. Iroh swallowed and stepped forward. "Jack, do you have a plan?" Jack nodded once. "Yes." Mutar asked quietly, "What is it?" Jack opened the gate. Wind rushed in, cold, sharp, and heavy with the scent of the mist waiting beyond. "My plan," he said, stepping forward. is not to run from the truth anymore. And with that, Jack crossed the threshold, the gate closing behind him with a thundering echo. The dragons roared, a sound of fear, sorrow, and respect. The people watched in stunned silence. The king stared helplessly. And the mist shifted, almost as if welcoming him. Jack Vance walked toward it without hesitation. Toward his family. Toward the truth. Toward whatever waited inside. And as he disappeared into the pale wall, the world finally understood. The boy who had no magic was now the one thing magic itself could not stop. The season ends here. A single question remains. What will Jack find on the other side?